Hello, I'm Jonathan Mast, and welcome to this edition of the Sedgwick Podcast. We have a returning guest today, but it's been a while. Adam Fisher, who's the Chief Data Officer for Sedgwick, joins us. And Adam, thanks for coming back on the show. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about transforming data into action. And so we probably should lead with the most important question. If you have an answer to this, what is your favorite Transformer character since we're talking about transformation? Do you have one from the Transformer movies?
Oh, yeah. I always like Optimus Prime.
There you go. That's probably the goal of every chief data officer, right? To be the one that has it all going on. So anyway, just a little fun before we jump in. But obviously, data is extremely important. It's continuing to grow every day. There's just more and more that we're all trying to handle in organizations. And so, Adam, first question. Comparison tactics help us understand our organization better and develop creative solutions. And the data used in benchmarking has evolved and become more sophisticated. So what's changed? Break it down for us.
Yeah, I think there's so much more data being tracked, maybe than there ever was before, and in some cases there's more and more systems involved in tracking all that data. So part of the challenge and I guess opportunity at the same time is bringing that together. So, more questions can be answered and more insights can be gleaned. But luckily, the biggest change that's occurred probably in the last, 5-10 years is there's just been so much evolution of new data tooling available. For the longest time, and I think this is certainly true at Sedgwick, the data team at Sedgwick or any of the analysts at Sedgwick, their main and go-to tool set was mainly Microsoft Excel or we're a big user of Business Objects, which was a very powerful tool. But in the last, call it, 5 to 10 years, you've got this whole emergence of, powerful visualization tools like Power BI, which is a Microsoft product, Tableau, which is now owned by Salesforce. And then the advent of Python, an open source programming language, and there's a package within Python called Pandas, which is very powerful for data analysis specifically. And when you combine the use of all these new tools with, some of the old stuff, even Excel, there's just so much more you can do. So it helps you become even more creative in some of these solutions that you can apply. And then for benchmarking, it helps you do better benchmarking because this has always been a tenet of benchmarking, but to do it well, it's kind of an art and a science. And the science part is trying to adjust what you're comparing so that you can make it as apples to apples as possible. We kind of have a challenge where, let's say, if you don't have a lot of data to do benchmarking, then you almost can't even do it. You need a certain amount of just data volume to work with so that you can carve out kind of what you're trying to compare to everything else. And that's one thing that they were really lucky at Sedgwick with such a massive book of business. We cover every industry under the sun. We've got thousands of clients and tens or hundreds of millions of claims. So we're confident that we always have something to compare to, and not only something to compare to, but an ability to adjust that target comparison to make it look just like what we're comparing to. And that can be done by making sure that the same states and geographies are involved, the same time periods involved. We even go into things like class codes and job titles and making sure that, for comparing one book of data that, has certain attributes, we'll tune it exactly to, a book of business. So because we can cut through, hundreds of millions of claims and kind of leave them on the cutting room floor, when we're done, we're almost certain that we have kind of a representative twin of what we're comparing to. And the tools that are available just make that process faster, so that you can be doing that kind of in every direction. So that's a bit of an overview.
Well, we know that transparent and robust data help drive the best claims outcomes. How has data transformed the claims process in our business?
Yeah, I mean, that comes down to just there's so much repetition, I would say, and kind of like how claims are processed or handled. And when you have, again, like hundreds of millions of claims kind of in the, kind of in the archives, you can see these patterns kind of continue to emerge. So that applying the data, again, using some of that same kind of focus that I described in the benchmarking process, where you're kind of tuning things so that you're certain that your comparison is set and kind of a twin of what you're comparing to, it can tell you all kinds of things about how, like a new claim that's coming in, the trajectory of that claim and how it's going to develop over time. So using that, massive amount of historic data, it's not just modeling that tells us like how that claim is going to develop. It could be all kinds of things. It's like, hey, maybe it's the coding quality, or even the notes that are being written about a claim. We can compare those to other claims that are just like it and all the notes that have been written about that claim, and then make, suggestions or insights about where, this new claim's going just based on the trajectory, because there's so many other things that are similar about it. One example here is we recently rolled out automated reserving for the first time, medical-only claims. So these are claims that only have, a few doctor's visits. Nobody's missing any time from work. We noticed that across our entire book, most examiners were just arbitrarily setting an initial reserve, and that reserve was probably in the $500 to $1,000 range. So it wasn't a bad reserve; it was just an arbitrary one. And then on a handful of clients, they did have some rules, but it was like a one-size-fits-all rule where, thinking of like a grocery store chain, they have like $1,000 kind of go-to rule, and another hospital system had a $775 rule. So they had a rule, but it was just kind of an arbitrary, like one-size-fits-all rule. And when we went to look at the data to come up with, hey, well, what would a better rule be, or should we even build a model for this? And we ended up not building a model, and it's kind of like this idea of transparency and just like applying data to the best practice. When we ran the rules and we looked at like the variation of like all the different ways that you could come up with a first reserve, there were about 100,000 different rules that we ultimately could come up with to like really pick that perfect first reserve. But when we kind of ran all the analysis, again, using some of those same tools I mentioned, the new Python stuff and all these great kind of free software essentially, we found that with only 6,000 rules, we were able to explain over 90% of the variation. So the thinking was, well, we could get it perfect if we had 100,000 rules, but we can get it close to perfect with only 6,000 rules, and that's like much easier to explain. So we ended up picking 6,000 rules that look at state, cause, nature, body part, and those rules are very good at picking that initial first reserve. So good that like when we run it across millions of claims historically, it's almost perfect at picking that first reserve, and kind of for closed claims, it's like right where those claims close. So just one example of how having a lot of data and using it kind of transparently in all kinds of different processes, you could start stacking all those processes on top of each other and really get to some efficient outcomes that save everybody time and actually make the outcome of a claim kind of like just better.
We talked in the first question about how much and how fast things are changing. So looking into your crystal ball or into analytics, how do you expect benchmarking to evolve in the coming years? I would imagine we're seeing rapid change.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it will continue to go in the direction that it's already been going, and maybe even faster. So kind of that process I was describing where you're, when you're doing benchmarking as a best practice, you're trying to, come up with that twin of what you're comparing to and making as many adjustments as possible as you can to help solidify that, A and B are kind of the same, even though they are fundamentally different. And you've accounted for all of the known differences that you can kind of filter away or apply in some kind of analytic process. So with the advent of, large language models and all that we keep hearing about with just artificial intelligence and machine learning generally, some of those same methods could start to be automated so that even if, say an analyst is less skilled at trying to do all of the adjustments that a very skilled analyst has kind of learned over time as these kind of large language models and these AI processes become more commonplace, they start to do some of those things that today require, somebody with many years of benchmarking and comparative analytics experience has. Now those can be done just kind of out of the box. So we're starting to see in even some of the tools that we use, some of these new and modern tools that focus on, advanced analytics, if you will, they're already starting to incorporate some of these capabilities so that you could just, like you're chatting with an analyst, say, hey, could you compare, these two, clients or these two populations? And, it might figure out really sophisticated ways to make sure that they're apples to apples that, even humans might forget, because even a skilled analyst who's got lots of experience with trying to make these adjustments, it's usually this kind of routine list of things that you might have to just, let me check for this, let me check for that. So, this is where computers are very good at not forgetting to do all the steps. And, again, even skilled analysts might forget to do some of those steps. So I see that happening over the coming years, that there'll just be better and more automated ways to complete benchmarking, maybe where you never even thought you needed it, just because the kind of processes and AI methods will start doing it for you.
Well, it sounds like a lot, just like everything else, is evolving quickly, and a lot of exciting things to come. So, Adam, let's dig into the concept of supporting claims holistically and the goal of end-to-end integration. How do the right tools, data, and people help improve performance and outcomes in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools and the people are probably the most important part. Like I mentioned with the data, that's just kind of this throwing repository of claim information that we've been collecting, and it's just, just logarithmically kind of exploding in size. So we definitely need better tools and the newer tools to kind of comprehend it and frankly just work with it. But the people are the most important part, and that's kind of where, at least in my experience at Cedric, and where I think we've made the most kind of progress, is actually bringing all of the data expertise kind of under one roof or under one team, and really collaborating more as a data team, as a group that has a common interest in focusing on better ways to, work with the data and go through some of the same common analytic processes. Like we're talking about benchmarking. That's a specific focus of what you might do with data, but maybe separate than what someone else might do if they're building a predictive model. Both might use all the data that we have, but they're very different. So having an ability to collaborate as a team, but kind of divide and conquer is pretty powerful. So, at the same time, we've got new tools that, members of our data team have worked with before, and other members are kind of learning anew. It's great to have, kind of collaboration and have help go to parties or people that have kind of used this tool before, and kind of help each other learn it faster. So we've taken the approach of kind of, on top of the traditional tools that we use, the Excel and the business objects, have added a whole slew of, new tools. And I believe those are the most modern ones that are available to really anybody in the world today. And now as one consolidated team, all of us are kind of upping our skill, both in the new direction where maybe we haven't been exposed to, Python or some of these open source algorithms, even large language models. I mean, those are new for everybody. But we're also seeing that, where parties on the team have a lot of expertise in, say, Excel or business objects, they're helping the other part of our team that has, more experience with some of the newer tools kind of get better with that kind of part of the equation, and vice versa. So had a lot of just great collaboration, and then also just like separation of tasks where, as somebody's learning kind of a new analytic kind of process or method, as we work in a collaborative data science kind of environment, it's pretty easy to replicate and share. And then we have lots of, call it meetings or kind of opportunities to tell each other what we're doing. I think that we're 100% remote, and we use a lot of the, Teams-based tools and chat, and people are constantly kind of sharing kind of work that they're doing and asking for help on specific items, and that's one way to really like improve the process. The other part of the end-to-end integration piece that's important is like, now that we have this like new kind of set of tools at our fingertips and have much more like direct access to just a ton more data, we can just do more on our own. In some cases, maybe there would have been examples where, and I think this is probably true of lots of organizations, where when you have pockets of people who have access to different amounts of data, there's just not as much self-service that can happen. You're kind of depending on other parties to like either get data for you or, open up access for you. So now that we have a more centralized data team that has like more holistic access where, possible, they're able to help themselves, and we have fewer like IT projects where we need to like just get, access. We now have our own access. We can just constantly improve our processes and constantly expand our abilities across just a bigger and bigger team.
Well, as we begin to wrap up and giving us a lot of great information, for those out there listening, how can organizations be more proactive? For instance, what questions should they ask? For example, are they using the right services, partners, processes? Certainly we offer so much, but what should they be looking at?
Yep. Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to the question before on just kind of like it's all about getting the right people, the right tools to access the data that, you might already have. So like, every organization is sitting on a gold mine worth of data. And I think the first question they should ask is like, is this data easily accessed? You go into most organizations and that's probably a no. We know that I hear this all the time with folks at Sedgwick and outside. We know we have some data, but we're not quite sure on how to get our hands on it. So that's the first thing you want to be asking, how to better get access to the data. And that's where like big centralized data teams kind of come into play. A long time ago, I worked at a big bank, and we had centralized access of like 200 colleagues had access to like all of the data. And that was pretty powerful because the rest of the organization knew, hey, I need to go to this organization who has access, and I would ask them to answer this question or not. And then I know that they would have access to the data. So first off, just getting access to the data. And then the other question is just, or the practice that helps get you on this road, I think, is just starting to use that data to answer more and more questions, just because, really well-run organizations, really data-driven organizations, they use data to answer every single question that they possibly can. In fact, the most data-driven organizations wouldn't accept answers that didn't have data behind them. And that's where we want to go, or where we're going. That you would always have evidence to back something up. So the other part about partners and processes, this kind of comes back to the culture of different organizations that can be pretty common usually in like larger organizations, especially ones with like really big IT functions that have made considerable investments in IT. They tend to want to build and process everything kind of on their own or internally, or build things versus buy things or even partner with things. And this is where it kind of gets more difficult. You kind of have to think about it as, well, even if I could build this myself, should I? If there's other tools on the market that can just do this faster or more easily, like, why wouldn't I use those? Like, why do I want to reinvent the wheel? And that's maybe a bigger challenge now that there's, with all the modernization of data tools that I mentioned, there's now like a data tool for everything. So it's almost like a new challenge of like, how do I pick the right tool or partner? Or, everybody's telling me that they can help me with this. Every tool is marketing itself as being amazing or overlapping on each other. So my advice there is like, you kind of just have to like test and learn. So we definitely, for every, 10 new tools that we might onboard that think are going to be as great as they were marketed to us, maybe one isn't. So you kind of have to be prepared that they're not always great as they are billed to be, and are going to tell you that they can do more. You're definitely going to get further faster by getting help from partners, adding more tools probably than less. I think just relying on the same old tooling that you might have ever had is not, as so many new ones have come out, and so many of the new ones that have come out are actually very good. So you kind of have to take that leap and try some. And the other part is, we've had the benefit of adopting a lot of new tooling in the form of like new data platforms even, and have scaled it well with like that more centralized team. But at the same time, we've even had some help from partners to come in and do some of the things that maybe we're not ready to do. And we've learned from watching those partners and how they do it, and then we've been able to take that process over and then iterate into that much more of a difficult kind of next, process. So, we're kind of scaling it and growing and then just adopting more and more of the tools and techniques. So I think that's one way to approach it.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for being with us today and providing such a wide and deep look at data, and we know it's changing. It'll probably change by tomorrow, of course, all the things that the team is working on and doing. But if people want to learn more, is there a particular place they should go to get more information about what we're doing?
Yeah, our website has so much great information about all the different services and kind of offerings and geographies that Cedric is in. And luckily now that the data team is like fully global, you can be certain that almost all of them have some element of data benchmarking, kind of analytics behind them. So really that is the goal of Cedric generally, is to kind of bring our, massive data, repository or kind of ability to really everything that we do, and to be kind of data driven, like I mentioned, where we're, using data in as many of the decisions that we can possibly make, and even getting to the point where we're now arming, those on the front line, things, examiners, adjusters, clinicians, with all that data and packaging it in a way that makes it really kind of actionable.
Great. Well, once again, thanks for being here today, and we hope you come back again soon and we'll talk about the next big thing. And so to our listeners, until next time, thanks for being with us today.